The morning mist still clung to the rooftops of Ashford Hollow when Eleanor Hartley unlocked the door of her small shop and breathed in the familiar smell of thread, wool, and lavender water. It was a smell that meant safety. It meant she had made it through another season without anyone in this quiet village learning who she truly was, or what she had run from. For 3 years, Eleanor had lived a careful life. She rose early, sewed late, and kept her words few. Her mother, Margaret, was frail with a weak chest, and her younger brother, Thomas, was only 12, still growing into the kind of boy who asked too many questions. Eleanor answered for both of them by working with her hands until her fingers ached, turning cloth into coats, dresses, and curtains for the families of Ashford Hollow. She never spoke of the town she had left behind. She never spoke of Lord Camden, the nobleman who had once accused her of theft, simply because she had seen him strike a servant boy nearly senseless behind his stables. She never spoke of the night she packed a single trunk and left before dawn, taking her mother and brother with her, believing that silence was the only shield she had. It was an ordinary Tuesday when the Duke of Ravensworth walked into her shop with a torn coat sleeve and an apology already forming on his lips. "I am told you are the finest seamstress in the county," he said, holding up the ruined sleeve as though it were evidence in a trial. "I fear I have made your task rather difficult. I caught it on a fence post like a man who has never worn a coat in his life." Eleanor did not curtsy the way most villagers did when they realized who stood before them. She simply took the sleeve, examined the tear, and said, "You caught it on more than a fence post, Your Grace. This looks like you fought the fence and lost." For a moment, Alistair Whitmore, newly titled Duke of Ravensworth, only stared at her. Then he laughed, a real laugh, the kind that surprised even him. "You may be the first person in this county who has dared to mock me," he said. "Then perhaps you have been keeping company with the wrong people," Eleanor replied, already threading her needle. That was how it began, not with grand declarations, but with a torn sleeve and a woman who refused to flatter him. Alistair had come to Ashford Hollow to settle the affairs of his late uncle's estate, a duty he expected to finish within a fortnight. Instead, he found reasons to linger. He claimed the roof needed inspecting, then the stables, then the old orchard behind the manor house. Each excuse led him back toward the village, and more often than not, toward Eleanor's shop. He was drawn to her honesty. In London, he had been surrounded since childhood by people who wanted something from him. A title, a fortune, an alliance. Eleanor wanted nothing. She teased him about his terrible taste in waistcoats and argued with him about books she had read twice and he had barely started. She never once asked about his estates or his income, and that, more than anything, made him trust her. They began to walk together in the evenings, along the lane that wound past the old mill and down to the river. Alistair told her about his uncle, a stern man who had never quite known how to show affection, and about the weight of a title he had not expected to inherit so young. Eleanor listened more than she spoke, but when she did speak, her words stayed with him for days. "You carry your title like a coat that does not fit yet," she told him once. "Give it time, it will grow into you, or you will grow into it." "And what do you carry?" he asked her. She looked away, toward the river. "Just my needle and thread, Your Grace. Nothing so grand as a dukedom." He did not press her further that evening, but he noticed the way her smile had faltered, just slightly, as though a shadow had passed behind her eyes. By early autumn, Alistair could no longer pretend to himself that his feelings for Eleanor were simple friendship. He found himself thinking of her at odd hours, composing conversations in his mind that he hoped to have with her the next day. He watched her hands as she worked, and thought them the most graceful hands he had ever seen. He watched her laugh at something Thomas said, and felt something in his chest loosen that had been tight since his uncle's funeral. One evening, in the small garden behind the village church, where the last roses of the season still clung stubbornly to their stems, Alistair took Eleanor's hand and asked her to marry him. "I have never wanted anything as plainly as I want you," he said. "Not the title, not the estate, not anything my family has ever given me. I want you, Eleanor, as my wife, as my duchess, as the woman who tells me the truth even when it stings." For a long moment, Eleanor said nothing. Then, gently, she pulled her hand from his. "I cannot," she said. "Cannot, or will not?" he asked, his voice quieter now, careful. "Both," she said. "Please, do not ask me to explain." She turned and walked away before he could see the tears gathering in her eyes, and Alistair stood alone among the roses, certain he had misjudged everything between them. He did not visit the shop for 2 weeks. He told himself it was pride, but in truth, it was confusion. He could not understand how a woman who had looked at him with such warmth could refuse him so completely, and without a single reason. Eleanor, meanwhile, spent those 2 weeks in quiet misery of her own. She had not refused Alistair because she did not love him. She had refused him because she loved him too much to drag him into the danger her past still carried. If she became a duchess, her name would be spoken in London drawing rooms, printed in society papers, whispered about at balls she would be expected to attend. And if her name traveled far enough, it would eventually reach Lord Camden, the man who had once destroyed her reputation to protect his own. He had powerful friends. He had already proven he would lie without hesitation to save himself. Eleanor could not risk what he might do if he learned that the woman he had once called a thief was about to become a duchess, with a duke's resources standing behind her. It was not only her own safety she feared for, it was her mother's fragile health, which could not withstand a public scandal. It was Thomas, still young enough to be shaped by whatever the world decided to believe about his sister. So she said nothing, and she let Alistair believe she simply did not want him, because that was a smaller wound than the truth. The village, however, was not as silent as Eleanor hoped. A traveling merchant, passing through Ashford Hollow with bolts of fine fabric, recognized her one afternoon in the market square. "Eleanor Hartley," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "I did not expect to find you so far from home. Tell me, did you ever clear your name after that business with Lord Camden?" Eleanor's blood went cold. She managed to steer the merchant away from curious ears, but the damage was already done. Whispers began to move through the village like smoke, and by the time they reached the manor house, they had grown into something far uglier than the truth. Alistair heard the rumor from his housekeeper, who repeated it with the careful tone of someone passing along gossip they did not fully believe. A thief, hiding from her past, deceiving the whole village, and perhaps the Duke himself. Alistair's first instinct was not doubt, it was fury. Not at Eleanor, but at whoever had spread such a story about a woman he knew to be honest to a fault. Still, he needed to understand. He needed the truth, not to condemn her, but to protect her. He rode to the county records office the very next day and began asking careful questions about Lord Camden, a name he vaguely recognized from London circles as a man with a reputation for cruelty toward his servants, though no one had ever proven anything against him. It took nearly a week of quiet inquiries, letters to old acquaintances, and a visit to a former servant of Lord Camden's household who had since found work elsewhere. The servant, a man named Peter Ashby, told Alistair everything. He had worked alongside Eleanor's family years ago. He remembered the night Lord Camden struck a young stable boy so hard, the boy lost hearing in one ear. He remembered Eleanor stepping between them, shouting for someone to fetch a doctor. And he remembered, days later, how Lord Camden accused Eleanor of stealing a silver brooch, a lie invented to ruin her credibility, before she could tell anyone what she had witnessed. "She never stole a thing in her life," Peter said. "She was punished for telling the truth. That is the whole of it." Alistair returned to Ashford Hollow with more than gossip now. He had a signed statement from Peter Ashby, and with his title and connections, he was able to obtain further evidence from the stable boy's family, who had long wanted someone to believe them. He did not go first to Eleanor. He went to the village, to the same market square where the merchant had spoken his careless words, and he made certain that the truth was heard as loudly as the lie had been. He explained, calmly and without cruelty toward anyone, what had truly happened years ago in Eleanor's old home. He watched the faces of the villagers shift from suspicion to shame, and finally, to quiet respect. Only then did he walk to Eleanor's shop. She was mending a dress when he entered, and she nearly dropped her needle when she saw him standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You should not be here," she said softly. "Not after everything that has been said." "I know everything that has been said," Alistair replied, "and I know everything that is true. I spoke with Peter Ashby. I have his statement. and evidence from the family of the boy you tried to protect. Lord Camden lied about you, Eleanor. He lied to protect himself, and you paid the price for his cruelty for 3 years. Eleanor's hands trembled as she set down her sewing. You did all that? I would have done more, he said, stepping closer. I could not understand why you refused me, not until I learned what you were protecting. Your family, yourself, even me, though I never asked you to protect me from anything. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, tears she had held back for weeks. I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid that if I became your wife, the world would look closer at me, and Camden would find a way to hurt us all over again. He cannot hurt you now, Alistair said gently. The truth is out, and it favors you completely. You never have to hide again. He knelt then, right there among the bolts of fabric and spools of thread, and took her hand for the second time. I am asking you again, Eleanor Hartley, not because I pity you, and not because I feel I must finish what I started. I am asking because I love you, fully, knowing everything now that I did not know before. Will you marry me? Eleanor looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for any trace of doubt or hesitation, and found none. Only the same steady warmth that had drawn her to him from the very first day, when he had walked in with a torn sleeve and an honest apology. Yes, she whispered, and then again, stronger. Yes, I will marry you. The news spread through Ashford Hollow, far faster than the rumor ever had. Villagers who had once whispered behind Eleanor's back now gathered in the square to wish her well, some ashamed of their earlier doubts, others simply glad to see two people who so clearly belonged together, finally free to be so. Eleanor's mother wept with joy when she heard, and Thomas could not stop grinning for days, boasting to anyone who would listen that his sister was going to be a duchess. In the months that followed, Eleanor did not abandon the shop that had given her family safety and purpose. She continued to design and sew, teaching other village women her craft, even as she took on the responsibilities of a duchess. Alistair often found her there, sleeves rolled up, laughing with her students, and he would lean in the doorway just to watch her, remembering the day she had told him his title did not yet fit him. It fit now, he thought, because she was beside him. Their wedding was held in the very garden where he had first proposed, among roses that had bloomed again in the spring. As Eleanor walked toward him, no longer hiding, no longer afraid, Alistair felt certain that whatever the world tried to take from them in the future, it would never take this. A love built not on titles or secrets, but on truth, patience, and the courage to fight for someone worth fighting for. And in Ashford Hollow, where a torn coat sleeve had once brought two strangers together, the story of the Duke and the seamstress became one the villagers told for years to come, not as a tale of scandal, but as a tale of love that refused to be silenced by fear.